Good evening, and welcome to the Fredericksburg Area Council on Transitions presentation on Social Security Basics. This evening, participants will learn about Social Security Disability Income, or SSDI, and Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, as well as other helpful tips you may need to know. We'd like to welcome our presenter, Grace Marshall, Community Integration Specialist at the Disability Resource Center in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Before we turn this over to her, we will be posting a link in the chat to a document that contains today's presentation, as well as some additional resources that will be shared tonight. If you are watching a recording of this video, please open the video in YouTube and access the resources in the video description below the video by clicking on the link. Thank you, and welcome, Ms. Marshall.
Thank you. I am working as a community integration specialist at the Disability Resource Center. And part of my job is to provide the core services of the CIL. Included in those core services are advocacy. And part of advocacy is assistance with benefits. We do assist with Social Security issues. And having said that, there are certain things that, we kind of get into pretty deeply, and other things that we refer, to attorneys or advocates that are a little higher level than my pay grade. So having said that, I'll go ahead and get started. Social Security disability programs. There is a lot of confusion when it comes to these programs, as you can imagine, for people who need to file for disability themselves, or individuals who have a loved one that has an acquired disability or was born with a disability. And it can be very confusing. There are two programs under the Social Security Disability Program, and we're going to talk about those tonight. We will be talking about just the basics. So there are so many facets to Social Security that you could literally have 3 or 4 trainings and still not touch on everything that individuals need to know. But hopefully you will take away, as Kim said, an understanding of the difference in the two programs, what type of programs they are, why one is different from the other, and the insurance as well, and the work incentives that go with them. We will do a very brief explanation of the work incentives, because again, you could get into those very deeply, and just 1 or 2 of those could take several hours. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. If you can get the next slide. Okay, so with this training, you're going to hear a lot of acronyms. The Social Security Administration, pretty much, that's pretty clear. SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. And right now, I'm not going to explain each one while we're looking at the acronyms. I just want you to kind of have an idea of what they mean when I am presenting them through the PowerPoint. SSI, Supplemental Security Income. SGA, Substantial Gainful Activity. FBR, Federal Benefit Rate. And FICA, Federal Insurance Contributions Act. Next slide. So in order to talk about Social Security disability, the first thing that we need to understand is, what is the definition of a disability? Now, these definitions that are used by Social Security are different for an adult versus a child. And they're not the same as what your doctor might say is a definition of a disability, or even the ADA. Because what you have to remember when it comes to Social Security is that Social Security is strictly looking at your ability to work. Okay, your ability to work, and if it is a child, then it's going to be that individuals' ability to engage in education, engage with other individuals in the school setting. So for an adult, the inability to engage in any substantial gainful activity because of a medically determinable physical or mental impairment. This impairment is expected to last at least 12 months or expected to result in death. Now, there is something when they're talking about a medically determinable physical or mental impairment, it can be a combination of these things. It doesn't have to be one particular disability. It can be a combination of disabilities that cause the impairment to last for a continuous period. Next slide. Now, the definition is a little bit different for a child. A child is considered disabled if the child is not engaged in substantial gainful activity. That's that SGA we were referring to earlier. And they have that medically determinable physical or mental impairment, or a combination of impairments that results in that marked and severe functional limitations. Again, they are expected to last 12 months or longer, or result in death. Next slide. So now that we know what the definition of disability under the Social Security Administration is, we need to look at the Social Security programs that assist folks that meet those eligibility requirements. SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, and SSI, Supplemental Security Income. Next slide. There are program similarities. Both are administered by the Social Security Administration. Both use the same rules to determine eligibility based on disability. And both provide monthly benefits to individuals with disabilities. There are, however, quite a few differences between the two programs. SSDI provides benefits to disabled or blind individuals who are insured by the workers' contribution to the Social Security Trust Fund. So when you are working and you get your paycheck and you see that Medicare taxes come out and Social Security taxes come out, then you know that you are paying into the Social Security system. For Social Security disability insurance, there are no resource or unearned income limits. And the key word there is unearned income limits. So if someone in the family passed away and left you $100,000, it's not going to go against your SSDI because it is unearned income. SSI, on the other hand, makes cash assistance payments to age, blind, and disabled individuals, including children, who have limited income and resources. They must have little or no income and resources. And we'll get into that a little bit in just the next couple of slides. But it is very different because there is no resource limit for SSDI. You have to be very low in resources and have very little income to get SSI. So they are very different. Next slide. So SSDI is funded by contributions from workers as required by the Federal Insurance Contributions Act, FICA. Contributions are based on your earnings or those of your spouse or your parents. SSI is funded through general tax revenues. They may be supplemented by the state in which you live. Now, it used to be that Virginia did not supplement SSI, but from what I understand, there are things that they can do to supplement. Since everything has changed so much with these programs, especially in connection with Medicaid, there are things now that the state can do to supplement the SSI program. Next slide, please. Okay, so SSDI is based on a wage earner's history. So when folks call the center and they are asking me if I can assist them with filing an SSDI claim because they've had to come out of work, the first thing that I ask them is, can you tell me about your work history? Because they have to have paid into the system to get SSDI. They cannot get it otherwise, unless they get it through a parent. Age when benefits begin also determine the amount that you get. Number of people under a wage earner also determines the amount. If the benefit amount is less than what we call the federal benefit rate, which is $841 in 2022, the individual may be eligible for SSI in addition to SSDI. So an example of that would be, let's say a person that is very young has paid enough quarters into the system to be prorated and are able to get SSDI, because there are ways that they can get SSDI as long as they've paid into the system if they're younger. But because they're younger, they don't have that those years of higher income. So oftentimes these young folks that end up getting SSDI because they've worked long enough, they may get a payment. Let's say they get a payment of $700 a month under SSDI. Well, if you have an SSDI payment of under the federal benefit rate, which is $841, then SSI can be applied for as well and bring it up to at least the federal benefit rate. So that individual would be able to apply for SSI if they have low resources, and possibly get SSI and SSDI together, since the SSDI would be low. Now, SSI is solely based on the federal benefit rate, which is $841. It can be affected by a number of things: a living situation. A child's rates are based on a parent's income and resources until they turn 18. I have a lot of folks that call me and they say, well, why does, this friend of mine, their child is able to get SSI, but why can I get SSI? They denied my child's SSI. And it is because of resources and income. That is why it is often necessary for the parent to wait until the child turns 18, because once the child turns 18, then the child applies on their own record. They don't look at the parent's record at that point. They look at their own record. Now, earned and unearned income affects SSI. Remember, only earned income affects SSDI, but earned and unearned income affects SSI. So if that same family member passed away and left you $100,000, it's going to knock you out of SSI for a while. Everything affects SSI to a degree. So, and everything has to be reported with SSI. Again, SSI may be supplemented by the state in which you live. Next slide. Okay, so then we get into the earnings requirements. Generally, 40 credits are needed for benefits for someone that wants to retire or go on disability at the age of 62. They must, if those 20 of those credits, must be in the last 10 years prior to disability to apply for SSDI. Again, this is another question that I get frequently in my calls at DRC, is why did I get turned down for SSDI? I worked for 20 years. Well, the person, after speaking with them, you find out they worked for 20 years, but it was 20 years ago. So they would not have that 20 credits paid in the last 10 years prior to disability application. So essentially what that means is you've got to have 5 years of work paid in. And the reason that it's 5 years is because you're only allowed to earn 4 credits per year under Social Security. And in 2022, 1 credit equals $1,510. So you can earn 4 of those in 1 year. You're not allowed to get credit for any more than 4. So that's why you have to have 5 years of work. Now, it can be part-time work. It doesn't have to be full-time work. It can be part-time work and you can still earn those credits. SSI, on the other hand, again, you have to have limited income and it will not meet the credits test of SSDI and or current income is low. You must have limited resources. The resource limit for an individual to get SSI is $2,000. If it's a couple that is applying, it's $3,000. So it's not a lot. That is the resource limit. So as you can imagine, just a little bit of money in the bank can stop an SSI application. It is a needs-based program. So they scrutinize that program. They watch that very tightly. They request a lot of information to be provided. Now, when we're talking about resources, Courtney, if you could pull up the resource listing, because this is something that confuses folks a lot when it comes to applying for SSI. Okay, so if you're looking at the supplemental security resources, what are resources? It says here that resources are things that you own. Now, our definition basically is anything that can be turned into cash. Social Security will look at it. So it's cash, bank accounts. You can see the list there: land, life insurance. Now, the life insurance, you can have life insurance for burial purposes that is not over $1,500. You can have 1 vehicle. So anything that you own that can be changed into cash or used for food and shelter is considered a resource. And again, when we're talking about children, Social Security Administration looks at the resources of the parents. So they do what they call deeming. Okay, so deeming is when they are looking at resources of a spouse, parent, spouse, sponsor of an alien, or sponsor's spouse as belonging to the person who applies for SSI. If a child's under 18 and lives with 1 parent, $2,000 of a parent's total countable resources does not count. But after that, it will count. And like I said, $2,000 isn't very much. So why are resources important? Explains here that the value of resources is only one of the factors that determines whether a person is eligible for SSI. There are some resources that do not count. The home in which a person lives, the land that home sits on. Now, I have seen where Social Security, if your home sits on, a plot of land where you have 10 acres of land and your home is sitting on, just a small portion, obviously, then they will count the rest of it. I believe they take 1 acre off and they don't count the acre that the home is sitting on. 1 vehicle, regardless of the value, if you or a member of your household uses it for transportation. Household goods do not count. Life insurance policies with a combined face value of $1,500 or less. Burial spaces for you and your immediate family do not count. So there are a number of things that do not count. But again, those resources have to be very low. I have seen folks that have actually come into a little bit of cash that had to put that toward some type of plan for burial funds in order to continue to be eligible for their SSI. So, there are also things that you can do. You see there where they're talking about a pass plan. We'll get into that a little bit later. That is a work incentive. And you also see them talking about the ABLE accounts. Money can be put into the ABLE accounts, and when it is protected from the eligibility rules of Social Security, of SSI. Now, it's, you know, it talks about installments and things here, but we're not going to get into those because those are different circumstances. You know, they're talking about about how in certain circumstances you would have to pay Social Security back for things that Medicaid is paid for, that SSI is paid for, and so forth. So that gives you an idea. It is not an all-inclusive list of the resources, the basic resources that Social Security looks at. People really have to pay attention to, you know, do they have retirement accounts set in somewhere? Or because what happens is Social Security runs these, you know, informational checks in all different areas, and most of the time they will uncover these things. And some folks have had them for so long they forgot that they even had them. So it does create a problem. And, you know, a lot of folks will even ask me, can I sell something to become eligible for Social Security or SSI? And the answer to that is, if you contact Social Security and let them know that you have an item that you need to sell, they will work with you. They will work with you. But if you just outright sell something and they find out that you have sold it, it will knock you out of eligibility for 3 years. So like I said, they scrutinize this program pretty thoroughly. If we can go back to the regular presentation.
Grace, real quick, I wanted to just remind everybody that we are sharing this presentation and the resources with you. I have posted that link in the chat. So if you have not seen this yet, when you click on the link, it'll bring this helpful links page up, and the resources page that I was just sharing with you is right here. So right now I'm going to go back to the presentation. And if you don't have the chat open and you don't see the link, I'll post it one more time for you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Courtney, because this is a lot of information to take in. And even though, you know, we try to break it down in a PowerPoint, you know, it's not always remembered what everything is referring to there. So, but, you know, again, if, you know, at the end, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And if I can't answer them, I will find the answer for you and get back with you. I think we were, let's see, yeah, okay. Now, continued differences in the two programs. SSDI pays benefits to adults who have a disability that began before the age of 22. This is called a child's benefit. It's paid on a parent's earning record. Parent must be receiving Social Security retirement, disability, or must have died and have worked long enough under Social Security. Now, why is this important? Well, when you're talking about young folks that need to get on Social Security, if they're on SSDI, and we'll talk about this in a little bit as well, then SSDI is associated with Medicare. And oftentimes a parent or parents need their young adult or their child to be on Medicaid because of waiver services and so forth. So it is important to understand that if you have, an example would be, let's say you have a 10-year-old child that has had a disability since birth. So, and one of the parents has had to go on disability. So that child could pull SSDI from that parent's record as long as they fit the physical and mental impairment that is required by the Social Security Administration. And what happens is they may be able to get SSI as well, but sometimes because it's a parent, sometimes the payment is too high to get SSI. So it's important for people to know that if there is a parent that has paid long enough under the Social Security Administration and they retire or are disabled or pass away, then that adult child or that child can get benefits from that parent. SSI, on the other hand, income and resources of family members living in the home are considered when determining eligibility. Parent to child deeming may reduce the benefit amount. Child must meet condition requirements and earning requirements. So let's say the child is too young to start working. They look at parents' resources and determine that that child cannot get it until that child turns 18 years old. So what happens when that child turns 18 years old? The next thing that they're going to look at is what's called in-kind income. Can I get the next slide, please? Okay, this is a little bit more about deeming. I thought in-kind was next. I'm sorry. Let's see. In-kind, there it is. In-kind income is food, shelter, or both that you get for free or for less than its fair market value. This can and will affect SSI payments. They can be reduced by 1/3. So what happens is you have an individual that normally would get $841 in their SSI check, and the parent has their meeting because all SSI recipients, especially young adults, have that meeting with Social Security, and Social Security wants to know, are you going to charge this young adult rent? And a lot of parents feel like, they don't feel like they should charge this young adult rent. But what happens is when you tell Social Security that, they reduce their payment. If you tell them that you're going to be buying all the food, they reduce the payment. Those two things together will cause the payment to be reduced by 1/3. And I think ultimately they end up with 560 plus. I don't have that in front of me, but it's reduced by 1/3. So what we tell folks is think about it when you make that decision, because $841 is not that much money, right? I mean, a lot of parents are, the Medicaid is more important than the SSI. But that $841 does help out, right? I mean, it can buy clothes, it can buy food, it can pay for different things. So, it's important that folks think about that before they make that decision. I always bring this to anyone's attention that has a young adult that is disabled, turning 18 or 19 if they're still in school, and they're going to the Social Security Administration to apply as an adult, because that is something else that folks get very confused about. Sometimes their child has SSI through their young years, and then at 18, sometimes 19 if they're still in school, Social Security sends a letter saying they're stopping their benefits. Now, Social Security is not saying that this individual is no longer disabled. What they want you to do at that point is come to the Social Security Administration or call them and apply as an adult, because the adult criteria is a little bit different from the child criteria. They have to apply as an adult when they turn 18 or 19. And if they don't, their payments will stop. We have had to, or I've had to assist folks in that process many, many times, because Social Security says that they send out this letter 2 to 3 months ahead of time before the person turns 18. But many parents insist that they've never received the letter. So we just go through the process of starting over again, and it does take a little bit longer, where if they had, managed to get in there, but by the time they were 18 or 19 or getting out of school, then the payments may not have been interrupted. So just keep that in mind. Next slide. Okay, so just an overview. SSDI is not affected by unearned income. It is affected by earned income over specific amounts, and we'll talk about that later. There are no resource limits for SSDI. On the other hand, SSI, unearned and earned income, reduces those amounts. Deemed income can affect eligibility. In-kind income can affect SSI amounts, and resources affect eligibility. So the two programs are very, very different. I have a lot of folks that, will say, well, I know my friend, her son is getting $1,500 a month, and my child is only getting $841 or $560. And anytime you hear that or you see that, play out that way, it's because one young adult is drawing from a parent's record somewhere, because there's no way under SSI that they can get $841. They have to be drawing from a parent's record to get that high of amount. And if a person is not getting $841, it's because in SSI, it's because they are counting food and shelter, and they're removing that 1/3. So, I mean, that's good for all parents to know, especially. Next slide. Okay, so like I said, there are two insurances associated with these programs. SSDI is normally associated with Medicare. That's a federal medical assistance program for Title II, which is disability and retirement beneficiaries. The problem with Medicare, and it doesn't matter who is found eligible for SSDI, they have to wait 24 months after their approval date to get the Medicare. And that always shocks people when I say it, and it should shock people, because none of us have figured out why. This is, a pretty vulnerable population. Many of them have come out of work because of a significant disability, and they have to wait 2 years before they can get their insurance. So they end up being referred to, the free clinics and so forth. If you meet certain income guidelines, you may become eligible for Medicaid in addition to Medicare. Again, those are those folks where that income, that monthly income, is lower than the federal benefit rate. And what happens is SSI can come in, and Medicaid is associated with SSI. So if the resources and income is low enough, they can get the Medicaid as well. And that's a medical assistance program administered by the states. In the state of Virginia, Medicaid must be applied for separately through the Department of Social Services. Eligibility for that program, just like SSI, is based on resources and income. A lot of folks will say, I never got a letter telling me when my child's Medicaid will start. Well, it's because in Virginia, you have to apply for it separately. You will not get a letter. Medicare, on the other hand, they will let you know when you're eligible for Medicare, I'm sorry. But Medicaid, you have to apply for it separately. Next slide. Okay, so this is where we're talking about the transition from child to adult. I kind of already went over that. But just remember, 18th birthday, they're supposed to send a notice 3 months before the 18th birthday to let you know that those benefits are going to stop. If they do not send that letter, just keep that in mind and call Social Security and let them know that your child is getting ready to turn 18. What do you need to do to file that new application as an adult? Next slide. So now that we understand the differences between the two programs, both programs will use the same criteria for applying. They can be applied for at Social Security. They can be applied for online. There was a time where you could only apply for SSDI online, and you could start the SSI process, but then you had to go into the Social Security Administration. Now they will let you apply for both of those online. SSA.gov has a list of items that you will need to make the process easier. If you go to SSA.gov and click on disability, there will be a link in there that will show you exactly what you need to gather together before you file. It's a considerable amount of information that you would need to get together. So you really want to take the time to read over that list. Everything will not apply to you. Everything will not apply to your child. But whatever applies to you, the process is much smoother if you have that together before you call Social Security or go to meet someone at Social Security or apply for Social Security yourself. Next slide. Okay, so we know what to do now. We know what the criteria is. And you go ahead and apply. And if we're talking about young adults, or if we're talking about any adults, they're thinking about working sometimes. Okay, some people want to go back to work, and they need to know how their benefits will be affected. Next slide. So there are folks that can help with this. Some of them are called WISAs, some are called WIPAs, some are called just Social Security advocates. But these folks can provide you with the knowledge that you need to make informed choices, because work, obviously, especially with SSI, it will affect it quickly. They can provide you with the work incentive information. And these WISAs are provided through the Social Security Administration if you're working with DARS or under the DD waiver services. Next slide. They cannot provide tax information or legal representation. They cannot obviously share your information with other agencies without your permission. Next slide. So the WIPAs, on the other hand, the Social Security Administration awards grants, contracts, and agreements to provide this community-based work incentives expertise to beneficiaries of both SSDI and SSI. The group is called Community Work Incentive Coordinators, but within that group, there are work incentive planning and assistance folks. Next slide. Okay, so those services that they can provide in depth are INR, information referral, problem solving and advocacy, benefits planning and advisement, benefits support planning, benefits management, assistance with work incentive paperwork, and they can also attend Social Security meetings with consumers. Next slide. This shows you the areas that are served. The CWICs will serve that lower area, and the WISAs serve more of Northern Virginia and this part of the southern part. Next slide. Okay, so when talking about work incentives, there are a lot of them. Okay. The easiest way to explain work incentives is just to give you a general explanation. And if you have a young adult, or if you yourself are on benefits and you want to go to work, then I would encourage you to contact one of the WISAs or community, work incentive coordinators, and we will give you the number at the end of the presentation to do so. You can see a lot of work incentive acronyms there. You won't remember all of those. You'll have to refer back to this PowerPoint to remember all of those. But we will go through each one of those pretty briefly. Let's go ahead and look at the next slide. First of all, we need to talk just a minute about the Ticket to Work program. This is a program under the Social Security Administration that provides access to free job-seeking services after literally assigning them a ticket to an employment network. Opportunities to work with employment networks that help with work-related skills and finding employment. Anytime anyone is under the Ticket to Work program, they are protected from medical reviews as well. Social Security will they can do medical reviews on individuals every 2 years, every 3 years, 4, 5, up to 7 years. And as long as they're under the Ticket to Work program, they're protected from those reviews, because anytime you go under a medical review, there's always a chance that they will see that you've improved just a little bit, even though you know it's not enough to hold down a full-time job. They may think it is. So you're always at risk of losing your benefits under those reviews. Next slide. Okay, so let's take a look at Social Security disability insurance. And it's very important to keep in mind that these work incentives apply just to that program, with the exception of one, and I'll let you know which one that is. So if someone is getting Social Security disability insurance and they want to go to work, doesn't matter, like I said, if it's full-time or part-time, they want to try and see what they can do. Well, Social Security is all about that, because when a person is working, they're paying into the Social Security system. So they want you to try to work. So they, I'm sorry, I'm reading this. They want you to apply for different jobs. They want you to look at where your area of interest is, because they want you to be successful. Social Security wants you to be successful. Why? Because you come off of benefits and you continue to pay into the Social Security system. So let's say that you have called Social Security and you let them know that you want to go to work. What they normally do is give you the information for the Ticket to Work program. The Ticket to Work program is literally a ticket that you can be assigned to, you can work with DARS, you can work with a number of employment networks, such as a Choice Group. Choice Group is a huge one in this area. And what they do is they work with you step by step on skills that you will need to do a particular type of job. They will also set benchmarks for you to see how well you're progressing. It's basically like a hand-holding thing for these individuals to go through the work process to see if they can be successful. And again, it does protect you while you're under that. It protects you from medical reviews. The thing you have to remember with the Ticket to Work is their ultimate goal is to get you off of benefits, right? So you do have to keep that in mind. Now, it is voluntary. You do not have to sign up for it. It's a wonderful program and it works very well for some folks, and some folks it doesn't. There are other work incentives that you can sign up for. You can let Social Security know if you're under the SSDI program. You can just let them know that you want to go back to work, that you have applied for, let's say you've applied for this part-time job at 20 hours a week. And if you're successful at that, maybe you can increase your hours. So Social Security says, okay, all right, well, the first thing we're going to give you under SSDI is called a trial work period. And as you can see on the PowerPoint, you can work for 9 months within a 5-year rolling period and receive your full benefits. They want you to test your ability to work, see what you can do. Okay, and you'll still receive your full benefits during that time. Now, when they look at a trial work period, I believe in 2022, they will consider a month under a trial work period if you reach $970. So what happens is, let's say you work, this month and you only did $800. Well, that won't count as one of your trial work period months. But the next month you hit $1,000. So that's one of your months that is used. You have 8 more. And you continue to use those until you hit that limit on 9 of them. And then Social Security evaluates what you've done. And then they look at substantial gainful activity. If they see that you're working at substantial gainful activity, then what they do is give you a grace period, but they will let you know that your benefits will stop at the end of that grace period. That grace period will be the month that they evaluate you plus the next 2. So you have 3 months essentially for that cessation to take place. Okay, and then they will give you even further of a safety net. They will tell you that you have an extended period of eligibility, which will last for 36 months after your 9-month trial work period is complete. Anytime your income falls below SGA, then what happens is Social Security will give you your check for that month. That can last for 3 years. Okay, the rules are a little bit different for self-employment because then we're looking at net employment, and we're looking at how many hours you work. So Social Security takes both of those things into consideration. And then there's even further of a safety net. They tell you you'll have an expedited reinstatement. If you're unable to continue work because of a disability, your benefits can be reinstated without the application process. Okay. Is that the bottom of that slide, Courtney, or is that we need to move to the next one?
Yeah, that's the bottom of that slide.
Okay, can we move to the next one? Okay, for SSDI, you can keep Medicare for up to 93 months. Now, Medicare, you still have to pay the monthly premium for Medicare, but they will allow you to keep it up to 93 months. They will look at any impairment-related work expenses that you have. So what is an impairment-related work expense? Well, if you need medication in order for you to work because of your disability, they'll take the cost of that medication off. So sometimes that lowers it to be below the SGA. If you have a wheelchair that you purchase, they will prorate that over so many months and they will deduct that amount. There's also what is called subsidies, and that's when employers pay workers more than the reasonable value for the work performed. An example of a subsidy might be someone that does not have full use of their hands. So they may, their use of a computer may be much slower than their coworker who does the exact same job, but they're getting the same amount of pay. And an employer will say, okay, this amount is a subsidy and this amount is actual pay. And what that does is it lowers the income for that person for Social Security purposes to determine if they can stay on benefits. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the performance of paid work in which a month's countable gross earnings or net earnings from self-employment in 2022 is $1,350. So that SGA we've been talking about, that's the amount in 2022. It's 2,260 or more for those who are blind. Okay, and again, when you're talking about self-employment, they do look at how many hours per month that you work, and they will take that into consideration. Next slide. Okay, now this is just going over the same things that we have already talked about. This is the trial work period. This will explain it for you when you have the PowerPoint. You can take a look back at it and see exactly what they're referring to there. Next slide. Okay, and again, it's going to go through each one of these. I guess I got ahead of myself, didn't I? Yeah. Okay, we can go through those if you want, because I've already explained them, and these are just in-depth explanations that can be used when you look at the PowerPoint that you can refer back to. Okay, there's the grace period. The next slide. Expedited reinstatement. Now, something to mention about expedited reinstatement. Like I said, if a person has to stop working or reduce their wages below SGA because of the same disability, it has to be the same disability, or it has to be a condition that has arose from that original disability. They have to be connected. But within 5 years, they can be reinstated with benefits without a new application. And that is huge, because most people know that as dealt with Social Security, these applications can take anywhere from 6 to 18 months to get through. Okay, next slide. Okay, then we get into SSI work incentives. I know this is a whole lot of information, but like I said, you'll be able to refer back to the PowerPoint for the definition of these. And there will be numbers at the end where you will be able to contact someone for, a more in-depth explanation and how to sign up for these programs. So for SSI, we'll go through each one of these as well. We'll go to the next slide. Okay. The first thing that SSI will do when they are determining how much income you have earned, because as a general rule with SSI, for every $2 a person earns, they will take $1 away from your SSI check. Okay, so if you have a young adult that just earns just $100 a week because they work a few hours, then the SSI check will be reduced by 50. That's the general rule. Okay, but they also take off the first $20 of earned income. They don't count that. That's called general income exclusion. And then the first $65 of earned income is not counted when determining SSI benefit amount. So let's say that same person that earned $100 working a few hours that week, they don't count the first 20. So now they're down to 80, and then they don't count the next 65. So what remains, they will take $1 away for every $2 that's left. That's how that's going to work. So you can see how the SSI check will be reduced, but they do give you these income exclusions right off the top for anyone that wants to attempt to work. Next slide. Now this one is really huge. Yes, that first $20 is unearned income. So I'm sorry, I should have clarified that. So let's say someone has, given you, $100. then that, that first $20 does not count. That is unearned income. So then the 65 will come off of the earned income. That's correct. Now the student earned income exclusion, this is a really good work incentive for SSI for our young people. Student must be regularly attending school or have an IEP under the age of 22, and Social Security will not count up to $2,040 of a student's monthly wages when they figure the SSI amount. Now, the maximum that they will exclude under this program is $8,230. So if a person is in school, let's say they're 17 and they're earning, just an extra $700 or $800 a month of spending money or whatever, education money or whatever they're using it for, $8,230 in that year will not be counted toward their SSI. So they will take a look at it, and as long as they are under that $2,040 per month, they will keep their SSI, the full amount, in place until they reach $8,230. So that is a huge work incentive for our young folks who are still in school. Next slide. Okay, now this is I all of a sudden forgot what SEIE is. The SSA, it'll come back to me in a second. The SSA reduces the student's maximum SSI by a portion of his or her total countable income each month. One gains far more in wages than one loses in SSI. So that is the student earned income exclusion. That's the program that we just talked about. And basically what it's saying here is that everyone always gains more when they're working. And we'll show you how that works in just a little bit. Next slide. Okay, so now we're back to the impairment related work expense. We talked a little bit about that under SSDI. This is the one work incentive that will apply to both programs. And as we talked about, it's the cost of items or services that a person needs in order to work. It can be deducted from their countable income when determining SSI eligibility. And it gives some examples here. Attendant care services that are paid out of pocket. So those individuals, of course, on waiver services, unless they're paying extra attendance out of pocket, that would not apply. Certain transportation costs, medical devices, medication, residential modifications, and more can count as an impairment-related work expense. Next slide. Okay, and in order to apply for that, you have to let Social Security know that you want to use an impairment-related work expense. And these are the things that Social Security will expect you to provide to them. List each expense, how they meet the criteria, meaning you have to have it in order to work. So it's connected to the disability. The date the expense begins, submit receipts. And it is better to have a face-to-face meeting when you're talking about, they call them IRWEs, impairment-related work expenses. They have to be done also on a monthly basis. Next slide. Okay, so now we come to the PASS plan. A PASS plan is a program that will allow an individual to set aside other income other than SSI and or resources for a specific period of time so they can pursue a work goal. The plan is SSI and SSDI eligible, has to be written specifically for you, and there's a list of individuals that can help you with a PASS plan. A PASS plan is about 11 pages long. So it's a very extensive plan, asking a lot of questions. You've got to be very thorough about what your steps are, and how much money is going to go into these accounts. So a benefit specialist is very, very important when it comes to creating these plans. Vocational counselors can help you as well. Sometimes you can find both in the same place. So anytime that you want to have a PASS plan, you really need assistance with that. I know I've known several individuals that have worked with PASS plans, and one of them was an individual that wanted to go into business for herself, baking items. So money went into this special account to buy all the items that she needed for her business. My understanding is that she was pretty successful at it. So it can be a very successful endeavor, but it does take a lot of time with this one. Okay, next slide. Examples, they give you examples of here of occupational goals. You can purchase job coaching, starting a business, buying tools to become a carpenter as example, or even pay for post-high school education if there's a work goal attached to that educational piece. Next slide. Okay, and for individuals who are blind, we have the blind work expense. They basically can deduct things that do not necessarily have to be related directly to their disability, but they need things to work. Okay, if they have to have, let's say specific transportation that maybe the impairment related work expense will not cover. Under the blind work expense, it will cover it. So it does not need to be related to their impairment to get a blind work expense. Okay, next slide. Then we have another program called 1619B, and this allows former SSI recipients who have lost their SSI. It allows them to retain Medicaid coverage because, like I said, a lot of folks, a lot of our parents say, it's not so much the SSI payment as it is the Medicaid that is necessary, because the Medicaid is what they're using for their waiver services. So to qualify for this, they have to have a loss of benefits that's caused by earned or a combination of earned and unearned income. They have been eligible for SSI for at least a month. And other than losing their cash payment, because remember, they take $2, they take $1 for each $2 you earn. So if they've lost their cash payment, they're still otherwise eligible for SSI. And they continue to have that disability determination. Okay, next slide. The person still needs Medicaid to work. We're still under the 1619B. They've used Medicaid in the last 12 months and expect to use it in the next 12 months. They can't pay medical bills without that Medicaid. They can have a gross income up to $46,340 in 2022. Social Security will take into account impairment-related work expenses, blind work expenses, PASS plans, and personal care expenses that are not covered by Medicaid. So again, this is a wonderful plan for someone who has started working and just lost their SSI because of earnings, and they still need their Medicaid. That's who this plan is for. Okay, next slide. And then we have Medicaid Works, which is an absolutely wonderful plan. I'm not quite sure why more individuals do not access this plan. This is a simple one-page application. It's done through the Department of Social Services. And a bank account needs to be opened up specifically for this, but it's a Medicaid plan option that will enable workers with disabilities to earn higher income and retain more in savings and resources while ensuring Medicaid coverage. Next slide. It is voluntary, the option will allow enrollees to earn up to $75,000 a year and be able to save $46,340 of those earnings and still retain their Medicaid. So it's a wonderful plan, a very short process. Okay, so those were the SSI incentives. So what happens when you sign up for these incentives, or you just go to work and you think you're doing okay? Well, it's very, very imperative that you report your income to the Social Security Administration. You can fax pay stubs. You can include any impairment-related work expenses with that fax. Reporting income monthly is the only way to avoid what is called an overpayment. Next slide. An overpayment occurs when Social Security has paid you too much. And what happens is they will send out a notification. It doesn't matter if it's you or your payee, but one of you will get a notification saying that you are in an overpayment status. How does that happen? Well, let's take a look at SSDI just quickly. Let's say that you maintained your benefits and you're only working part-time, but you went over SGA. Now with SSDI, you cannot go over SGA. If you go over SGA in any given month, you're not supposed to cash that Social Security check, period. It's that simple. And it's very difficult because they deposit these checks into your account. So sometimes they get mixed with other funds, but you really have to keep an eye on how much you're earning, because if you need Social Security and you need Medicare and Medicaid, you don't want to lose your benefits for just a few dollars. I have seen folks that just go over the SGA by $20 or $25 in several months. And because of that, they weren't supposed to cash the Social Security check. Well, that can add up pretty quickly. If your Social Security check is $1,500, $2,000 a month, it adds up pretty quickly. And that is called an overpayment, because according to Social Security, you're not supposed to use those funds. So they send you a bill and they tell you have 30 days to pay it. Or they will send your payee a bill and tell them they have 30 days to pay it. Because if you're the payee for someone else, or if you have a payee, that payee is responsible for that overpayment. Okay, and it can be, I have seen people, I have seen Social Security take payment from people's retirement. I have seen them, deduct wages from representative payees. The only way that you can get out of an overpayment situation is prove them wrong, which is very hard to do, and prove that it is a hardship for you to pay it back. Well, that's not usually too hard for SSI recipients, but proving that Social Security is inaccurate is a very difficult thing to do. So you really have to keep an eye on your earnings. Now, this can get pretty complicated when it comes to SSI, because SSI can go up and down based on a person's earnings. So you really have to send in those pay stubs on time every month, and that will help a lot in avoiding an overpayment. Okay, next slide. Okay, we just went through how that happens. So you don't want to get into an overpayment situation, like I said, but you do want to work. And these are some examples of how working, even though you're receiving benefits, you always come out ahead. The first example is someone that is on SSI, and you'll see that there is 0 earned income, no student income exclusion, general income exclusion, the unearned income, they take $20 off, they take $65 for earned income, even though you didn't need it because you didn't have any earnings and no one gave you any money. So if you drop on down, you'll see the base rate of SSI, you'll get the full amount, and a person lives on $841 per month. So let's take that same person in column B, where this person earns $945 a month. It is a student, so that $945 is not going to count. So it goes down to 0, and they don't divide anything by 2, because remember, they take 1 for every 2 that you have. So they get their base SSI rate and their countable income. So that person gets $1,786 for that month. Next slide. Now this is the same situation, except in the first one, they earn $945. They take off that 20, they take off that 65, that drops them down to $860 in earned income, because they will take it, even that 20 off, even though it's earned income. Total countable income, remember, they divide it by 2, because they take 1 for every 2 you earn. So you're left with $430 of countable income. But you have a past, no, not on this one. You don't have a past deduction. I'm sorry. I'm looking at something different. So you have your base SSI rate, total countable income, and you can see where that countable income comes off of your SSI. However, you still have your $945 that you earned plus your adjusted SSI payment. So you still come out ahead, because you end up with $1,356. I hope that made sense. The next column, same situation, only they have an impairment related work expense. You can see that $200 come off. So that reduces their total income to $660, which reduces the half down to $330. And the bottom line is going to be the $841 they get in SSI minus the $330 they've earned of earned income. So their SSI payment dropped down to $511, but they get their $945 that they earned. So it's $1,456. So as you can see, it's always better if you can work, even if it's part-time. Next slide. And here we have, let's see, this is the one with the past deduction. You can see that first example where there was no past deduction and they had the $945. They had the impairment related work expense, which dropped their income down to $330, which lowered their SSI payment to $511. So their countable income is $1,456. But over in the next column, they put that $330 into a past plan. So they get the $945, the $840, the full $841. And, then they're looking at the $330. So they end up with $2,116 total countable income. So again, it always pays to work if a person can, even if it's just a small amount. Next slide. So these are the important contacts that I was telling you about. You obviously see the Social Security Administration. There's a number to your local office. Virginia Department of Aging and Rehab Services. They can help with quite a few things, including the work incentives, explaining the work incentives. And of course, we're the Disability Resource Center. Social Security Online, if you would like to apply online or get information online. Pass Help. Pass, like I said, that particular program is 11 pages long just to apply. So most people do need assistance with that. Virginia Access is the folk, those are the folks you call for all work incentives. If you want to find out exactly how benefits will be impacted if you go to work or your loved one goes to work, those are the folks that can tell you. And they have a toll-free number there and also their website. So anyway, those are the folks that you need to speak with. You can give me a call. I mean, like I said, I can answer a lot of the questions, and what I don't know, I will find out for you. I do want you to see what is coming in 2023. I think we have a fact sheet for that. If we can pull that up. So some of these numbers are changing. All of these numbers change just a little bit. Okay, so they're talking here about the cost of living adjustment. Most people have heard that they're going to get an 8.7% COLA for 2023. But if you go on down just a little bit, I mean, if you have questions about the other stuff, I can tell you what they are, but I wanted to see, I think there's a little bit further. Okay, here we go. Substantial gainful activity, which is now $1,350 a month. In 2023 will change to $1,470. And you can see the difference of substantial gainful activity for the blind. The trial work period, which right now is $970 a month. That's what they count a trial work period month. Again, if you don't hit that amount in a month's time, they don't count it. But in 2023, that's going to go up to $1,050. Let's see, where am I? Okay, that gives you information about, okay, the SSI federal payment, which is now $841, is going to go up to $914. And you can see the amounts there for a couple. SSI resource limits, unfortunately, will not change. They haven't changed for years. You think they would change a little bit, but they don't. The SSI student income exclusion, which right now is $2,040, is going to jump to $2,220 with an annual limit of $8,950. Let's see, and the rest of it, I believe, is estimated monthly Social Security benefits. The other fact sheet is just simply a press release from Social Security talking about the COLA, I believe. Yeah, 8.7% benefit increase for 2023. So you'll be able to know exactly what a person will be getting. I hope that wasn't too confusing. There are a lot of facets to even this basic information that we talked about, but that gives you a baseline of, of understanding the difference in the two programs, the difference in the insurance that goes with those programs. And if you have any questions, you're certainly welcome to give me a call, and I will do the best I can to answer them.